What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So where Icathia once stood, this is the long story I am going to be reading today. We recently went through Jax and also Zillion. They both tie in nicely with this story, but since it's so long, I've decided to dedicate a separate video, which is this video, to this very story. So, as you can see there, this is probably that region versus, I assume, the origins or the beginnings of the Void. It looks like the Void are winning, at least in these people's minds. These guys are in mid-flight. I'm sure they're thinking, not the best idea. Not the best idea. What's interesting as well looking at this is there doesn't appear to be any voidlings just yet. It seems to all be one complete thing, doesn't it? One complete void spawn. No Malzahar, Cassidin, or the rest of the crew there at the moment in time. Anyways, yeah, let's kick things off with the story. So, my name is Axe Amok. Var Choi. Is this Jax? No, it's not, is it? This is I think it might be the Mage King. Var Choi Kahori Icathia. Axamuk, well, I murdered that. Axamuk was my grandsire's name, a warrior's name, and it means keeper of edges, and it is an auspicious title to bear. Axamuk was there we go, last of the Mage Kings, the final ruler to fall before the Shuriman Sun Empress, when she led her golden host of men and gods into the kingdom of Icathia. Va is my mother and Choi my father. Since the name Va Choi. Okay. Icathia is the name of the blood-bonded clan to which I was born, one with an honourable history of service to the Mage Kings. Okay. I have borne these names since birth. Okay, so that is his name. Only Koarai is a new addition. The fit is new but already feels natural. The name is now part of me and I bear it with pride that burns bright in my heart. The Koarai were once the life wards of the Mage Kings, deadly warriors, which we found out about a little bit. I think it was in Jax's? No, it was Velkos' story. Deadly warriors who dedicated their lives to the service of their master. When Axamok the king fell before the god warriors of the Sun Empress and Icathia became a vassal state of Shurima, every one of them fell upon their swords. Yep. But the Koarai are reborn, rising to serve the new Mage King and reclaim their honour. I bear the sigil branded on my arm, the scroll-wrapped sword. My name is this guy again. I repeat it over and over, holding on to what it represents. I do not want to forget it. It is all I have left. So interesting to find out a little bit about his the origins of his name, the logic behind why his name is so difficult to pronounce. And tying in nicely, I think, with the Velkos story where these guys went to find some of their fallen brethren, and they found out what happened to them. Let's put it that way. So, I don't think any of them survived as well. No, I don't think they did. No. So, I'm going to call it now Chapter 2. Was it only this morning I and the rest of the reformed Koarai marched through the streets of Icathia? It seemed like a lifetime ago. The wide thoroughfares were thronged with thousands of cheering men, women and children. Clad in their brightest cloth and wearing their finest jewellery to honour our march, they had come to witness the rebirth of their kingdom. For it was Icathia that was reborn today, not just the Koarai. Our heads were high. My chest swollen with pride. We marched in step, gripping the leather straps of wicker shields and the wire-wound hilts of our curved Nimcha blades. To bear Icathian armaments had been forbidden under Shuriman law, but enough had been wrought in secret forges and hidden in caches throughout the city, in readiness for the day of uprising. Okay, a little bit of a rebellion popping off here. Okay. I remember that day well. Do you know? I don't think it's going to go too well. The city had been filled with screams as Bane crowds chased down the murdered every Shuriman official they could find. Resentment for centuries of humiliating laws intended to eradicate our culture, and brutal executions for breaking those laws came to a head in one blood-filled day of violence. It doesn't matter that most of these people were merely, whatever that is, I guess servers, merchants, and whatever that is. They were servants of the hated Sun Emperor and they needed to die. Overnight, Icathia was ours again. Sun disc effigies were pulled from rooftops and smashed by cheering crowds. Shuriman script work was burned and their treasures looted. The statues of dead emperors were desecrated, and even I defaced one of the greatest frescoes with obscenities that would have made my mother blush. I remember the smell of smoke and fire. It was the smell of freedom. I held to the feeling as we marched. My memory called the smiling faces and the cheers, but I could not pick out any words. The sunlight was too bright, the noise too intense, and the pounding in my heart and head unrelenting. I had not slept the previous night, too nervous at the prospect of battle. My skill with the Nimcha was average, but I was deadly with the recurved serpent bow slung at my shoulder. Its wood was well seasoned, protected from the humidity by a coat of red lacquer. My arrows were fletched with azure raptor feathers and had carved their piercing heads from razored obsidian sourced from the thaumaturges, the magicas of earth and rock. Long runs through Icathia's lush coastal forests and along its high mountain trails had given me powerful, clean limbs to draw the bowstring and the stamina to fight all day. A young girl, her hair braided with silver wire and with the deepest green eyes I had ever seen, let's get rid of that, placed a garland of flowers over my head. The scent of the blossoms was intoxicating, but I forgot it all as she pulled me close to kiss my lips. Okay. She wore a necklace and opal set in a swirling loop of gold, and I smiled as I recognized my father's craft. I had tried to hold to her, but our march carried me away. Instead, I fixed her face in my mind. I cannot remember it now, only her eyes, deep green like the forests of my youth. Soon even that will be gone. Easy, Axa, said, this is Jax. Syjax, Kale, Ren, Kahorai, Icathum. Popping a freshly shelled egg into his mouth, definitely, Jax. She'll be waiting for you just when this day is done. I said, Colgrim, jabbing his elbow into my side, him and 20 other strapping young lads. I blushed at Colgrim's words and he laughed. Craft her a fine necklace from Shuriman gold, he continued, then she'll be yours forever, or at least until morning. I should have said something to berate Colgrim for slighting the girl's honour, but I was young and eager to prove myself to these veteran warriors. Syjax was the beating heart of the Kaari, a shaven-headed giant with a skin pock-marked by the ravages of a childhood illness. Right, and a forked beard stiffened to points with wax and white chalk. Colgrim was his right hand, a brute with cold eyes and a thorough tattoo, though I had never heard him talk of his wife. Oh, brothel, is it? Betrothal tattoo. Though I never heard a brothel tattoo. Though I had never heard him talk of his wife. These men had grown up together and had learned the secret ways of the warriors since they were old enough to hold a blade. Okay? But I was new to this life. My father had trained me in as a, whatever that is, an artisan of gemstones and maker of jewellery. A meticulous and fidedious man. Such coarse language was anathema to him and unfamiliar to me. I relished it, of course, eager to fit in with these leather-tough men. Go easy on the lad, Colgrim, said Syjax, slapping my back with one of his massive hands. Meant as a brotherly pat, it rattled the teeth in my skull, but I welcomed it all the same. He'll be a hero by nightfall. He shifted the long axe-headed pole arm slung at his shoulder. The weapon was immense, its ebony heavy haft half carved with the names of his forebearers, and the blade a slab of razor-edged bronze. Few of our group could even lift it, let alone swing it, but Syjax was a master of weapons. Yep. I turned to catch a last glimpse of my green-eyed girl, but could not see her amid the tightly packed ranks of soldiers and the waving arms of the crowds. Time to focus, Maxa, said Syjax. The scryers say the Shurimas are less than half a day's march from Icathia. Are the god warriors with them? I ask. So they say, lad. So they say. Was it Jax that killed one of them? One of the god warriors? I think it was, wasn't it? Is it wrong that I can't wait to see them? Sajak shook his head. No, for they are mighty, but as soon as you do, you'll wish you hadn't. I did not understand Sajak's meaning and said, why? He gave me a sidelong glance because they are monsters. Have you seen one? I was filled with youthful enthusiasm, but I still remember the look that passed between Sajax and Colgrim. I have access, said Sajax. We fought one at Baizeki. Baizek. We had to topple half a mountain to put the big bastard down, Colgrim added. And even then, only Sajax had a weapon big enough to take its head off. I remember the tale with a thrill of excitement. That was you. Sajax nodded, but said nothing, and I knew to ask no more. The corpse had been paraded around the newly liberated city for all to see, proof that the Shuriman God Warriors could still die. My father had not wanted me to see it, fearing it would inflame the desire to rebel that had smouldered in every Icathian heart for centuries. The memory of exactly what it looked like is gone now, but I remember it was enormous beyond belief, inhuman and terrible. I would see the God Warriors later that day. And then I understood Sajax's meaning. Okay, this is interesting development. Chapter 2. Good to see his connection with Jax. Like I said before, this ties in nicely with Jax and Zillion. I wonder if we're going to see Zillion later on in the story as well, and tying in a little bit with Jax's bio and story as well, where he kills one of these God Warriors. So, Chapter 3. We formed up on the gentle slopes before the crumbling remains of the city walls. Since the coming of the Sun Empress, over 1,000 years ago, we had been forbidden to reclaim the stone or rebuild the wall, forced to leave the rubbles as a reminder of our savage of our ancient defeat. But now an army of stone wrights, labourers and thaumaturges were hefting giant blocks of freshly hewn granite into place with windlass mechanisms that crackled with magic. I felt pride at the sight of the rising wall. Icathia was being reborn in glory right before my eyes. More immediately impressive was the army taking position athwart the hard-packed earthen road leading into the city. 10,000 men and women clad in armour of boiled leather and armed with axes, picks and spears. The forgers had worked day and night to produce swords, shields and arrowheads in the day following the uprising, but there was only so much that could be produced before the Sun Emperor turned his gaze upon their rebellious Strape and marched east. I had seen pictures of ancient Icathian armies in the forbidden texts. Brave warriors arrayed in serried ranks of gold and silver, and though we were a shadow of such forces, we were no less proud. 2,000 Talon riders were deployed on either flank, their scaled and feathered mounts snorting and stamping clawed hooves with impatience. 1,000 archers knelt in 2 long lines, 50 feet ahead of us, blue-flecked shafts planted in soft loam before them. 3 blocks of deep-ranked infantry formed the bulk of our line, a bulwark of courage to repel any ancient oppressors. All down our line, crackling energies from the earthcraft of our mages made the air blurry. The Shurimans would surely bring mages, but we could counter their powers with magic of our own. So this is interesting. So I wonder how this ties in with what happens with the Void. Is this going to happen at the same time? Anyway, read it and you'll find out. So, I've never seen so many warriors, I said. Colgrim shrugged. None of us have, not in our lifetimes. Don't get too impressed, said Sajax. The Sun Emperor has 5 armies, and even the least of them will outnumber us 3 to 1. Okay, so it's not really going to work then. I tried to imagine such a force and failed. How do we defeat such a host, I asked. Exactly. Sajax did not answer me, but led the Kare to our place in the line before a stepped structure of granite blocks. Shuriman corpses were impaled upon wooden stakes driven into the earth at its base, and flocks of Karen birds circled overhead. A silken pavilion of crimson and indigo had been raised at its summit, but I could not see what lay within. Robed priests surrounded it, each one weaving intricate patterns in the air as with their star metal staves. Oh, is this where they release the Void, thinking the Void's going to fight for them? This is probably it. I did not know what they were doing, but I heard an insistent buzzing sound like a hive of insects trying to push their way into my skull. The pavilion's outline ripped like a desert mirage, and I had to look away as my eyes began to water. My teeth felt loose in their gums, and my mouth filled with the taste of sour milk. I gagged and wiped the back of my hand across my lips, surprised and not a little alarmed to see a smear of blood there. What is that? I asked. What's in there? Sajak shrugged. A new weapon. I heard something there. Whatever they are found deep underground after the earthquake at Sabira. Now I think it was Zillion that was opposed to this. I think maybe even Jax was opposed to it as well. What kind of weapon? Does it matter, said Colgrim. They said it's going to wipe the gold armoured dung eaters from the world. It might do, but it might wipe out everything else as well. Even those thrice damned god warriors. The sun was close to its zenith by now, but a shiver worked its way down my spine. My mouth was suddenly dry. I could feel tingling in my fingertips. Was it fear? Perhaps. Or maybe, just maybe, it was a premonition of what was to come. An hour later, the Shuriman army arrived. Okay, it's chapter 3. Interesting as well. Okay. So this ties in nicely with what we're probably going to see at the top. They're going to use the Void, to fight Shurima, and it's kind of going to backfire as well. Chapter 4. I had never seen such a host, nor ever imagined so many men could be gathered together in one place. Columns of dust created clouds that rose like a gathering storm set to sweep the mortal realm away. And then through the dust I saw the bronze spears of the Shuriman warriors, filling my sight in all directions. They marched forward, a vast line of fighting men with golden banners and sun-disk totems glimmering in the noonday sun. From the slopes above we watched wave after wave come into sight, tens of thousands of men who had never known defeat and whose ancestors had conquered the known world. Riders on golden mounts rode the flanks as hundreds of floating chariots roved ahead of the army. Heavy wagons the size of river barracudas bore strange war machines that resembled navigational astrolabes, spinning globes orbited by flaming spheres and crackling lightning. Road priests came with them, each with a flame-topped staff and an entourage of blinded slaves. At the heart of the army were the god warriors. Much else fares from my mind, the blood, the horror, and the fear, but the sight of the god warriors will follow me into whatever lies beyond this moment. Wow. Oh, I saw how many? 9 of them, towering over the men they led. Their features and bodies were an awful blend of human and animal, like Nasus and Renekton, and things that have never walked this world and never should. Armoured in bronze and jade, they were titans, inhuman monsters that defied belief. Their leader, with skin as pale and smooth as ivory, turned her monstrous head towards us. Enclosed in a golden helm carved to resemble a roaring lion, her face was mercifully hidden, but I could feel her power as she swept a scornful gaze across our line. A palpable wave of terror followed in its wake. Our army shrank from the scale of the enemy force, and the brink of fleeing before even a single blow was struck. Steadying shouts arose from our brave leaders, and an immediate rout was halted, but even I could hear the fear in their voices. I too felt an almost uncontrollable urge to void my bladder, but clamped down on the feeling I was Kahorai. I wouldn't piss myself in my first battle. Even so, my hands were clammy and I felt a sickening knot form in my gut. I wanted to run. I needed to run. We could not possibly stand against such a force. Big bastards, aren't they? Said Colgrim, and nervous laughter rippled through our ranks. My fear lessened. They may look like gods, said Syjax, his voice carrying fair and wide, but they are mortal. They can bleed, and they can die. I took strength from his words, but I wondered now if he knew just how wrong he was. We are Icathians, he roared. We are the heir of the kings and queens who first settled this land. It is ours by right and by birth. Aye, we are outnumbered, but the warriors our enemies have sent are slaves, and men whose only loyalty is to coin. True. He raised his weapon high, and the sunlight shone from its polished blade. He was glorious in that moment, and I would have followed him to the very end of the world if he asked me to. So, when are they going to release the Void? We fight to live in freedom, not in slavery. This is our home, and it is a land of proud people, of free people. There is nothing more stronger than that, and we will prevail. A cheer began as the Kahorai ranks, and was swiftly carried to the other regiments in our army. Icathia. It echoed from the rising walls of our city and was carried to the Shuriman host. The god warriors spoke swiftly to their attendants, who turned and ran to bear their orders to the wings of the army. Almost immediately, our enemy began to move uphill. They came slowly, their pace deliberate. On every third step, the warriors hammered the halves of their spears on their shields. The noise was profoundly unnerving, a slow drumbeat that slapped the will of we, who were soon to feel the tips of those blades. My mouth was dry and my heart hammered in my chest. I looked at Sijax for strength to take courage from his indomitable presence. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. This was a soul who knew no fear, who rejected doubt, rejected doubt and stood firm in the face of destiny. Sensing my gaze, he glanced down at me. Egg, he said. A pair of peeled eggs lay in the palm of his hand. I shook my head. I couldn't eat, not now. I'll take an egg, said Colgrim, taking one and biting it in half. Sijax ate the other, as you do, and the pair of them chewed thoroughly. The Shuremans drew ever closer. Good egg, noted Colgrim. I add a dash of vinegar as I boil them, Sijax replied. Makes them easier to peel. Clever. Thanks. Ran the conversation just before they were about to die. I looked back and forth between them, unable to reconcile the mundane nature of their words as an all-conquering army marched upon us, and yet I felt soothed by it. I laughed, and that laughter swiftly spread. The Korai were laughing, and soon, without knowing why, our entire army was laughing. The fear that had threatened us to undo us all now fled. Fresh resolve filled our hearts and put iron in our sword arms. The Shuremans halted 200 yards from us. I tasted a strange texture in the air like biting on tin. I looked up in time to see the spinning globes of the war machines burning with searing light. The priests attending them swept their staves down. One of the flaming spheres detached from the globe and arched through the air towards us. It landed in the midst of our infantry and burst into an explosion of pellucid green fire and screams. Another sphere followed, then another. I gathered the smell of roasting. Wow, flesh billowed from the ranks, horrified at the carnage being wrought by our warriors held firm. More of the spheres arced towards us, but instead of striking our ranks, they wobbled in the air before reversing course and smashed down in the heart of the Shremen spearmen. Amazed, I saw our thaumaturges, we call them mages, holding their staves aloft, and crackling lines of magic flickering between them. The hairs of my arms and legs stood in the shimmering air as if the veil was being drawn upon us. More of the searing fireballs launched from the stream of war machines, but they exploded in midair, striking the invisible barrier woven around our force. Cheers overcame the cries of pain in our ranks. I let out a breath, thankful that I had not been among the war machines' targets. I watched those piteously wounded men dragged from the rear by their comrades. The temptation to remain there must have been tremendous, but we Icathia descended from explorer kings, and not a single warrior failed to return to their place in the battle line. The strain on our mages was clear, but their power was holding the Shremen barrage at bay. I glanced over my shoulder to the pavilion atop the pyramid. There too the priests were straining with all their power. To what end I could not imagine. What manner of weapon lay within, and when will it be unleashed exactly? Stand to, said Sijax, and I returned to my attention to the army before us. They'll come at us now, a big wave to test us. I looked back at the Shuremans who came at us in a run. Arrows flashed from the lines of archers ranged before us, and scores of enemy warriors died. Bronze plate and shields saved some, but the range was so close that many fell with shafts punched clean through their breastplates. Another volley hammered the Shuremans, swiftly followed by another. Hundreds were down. Their line was ragged and disorganized. Now, roared Sijax, into them. Our infantry surged forward into a wedge, spears lowering as they charged. I was carried by the mass of men behind me, managing to drag my blade from its sheath as I ran. I screamed to keep my fear at bay, worrying that I might trip on my scabbard. I saw the faces of the Shuremans, the braids in their hairs, the gold of their crests, and the blood smearing their tunics. We were so close, I could have whispered, and they might have heard me. We struck their wavering ranks like a thunderbolt. Spears thrust and shivered, halves splintered with the impact. Driven by sheer will and 1,000 years of pent-up anger, the momentum of our charge clove deep into their ranks, splintering them and breaking their formation completely. Anger gave me strength, and I swung my sword. It bit into flesh and blood splayed me. Okay, I heard screaming. It might have been me. I cannot say for sure. So this guy is the final Mage King, I think, is it? Or is it just someone else? Anyway, either way, I'm surprised he's survived so far. I tried to stay close to Sijax and Colgrim, smart, knowing that knowing that where they fought, Shuremans would be dying. Okay. I saw Syjax felling many men by the dozen with his huge polearm, but could no longer see Colgrim. I soon lost sight of Syjax in the heave and sway of the surging warriors. I called his name, but my shout was drowned in the roar of battle. Bodies slammed into me, pulling at me, clawing at my face. Icathian hands or Shuriman, I had no idea. A spear stabbed toward my heart, but the tip slid from my breastplate to slice across my arm. Wow. I remember pain but little else. I hammered my sword into a screaming man's face. He fell and I pushed on, made fearless by fear and savage joy. I roared and swung my sword like a madman. Skill was meaningless, I was a butcher hacking meat. Oh, you can just see it now. I saw men die whose skill was much greater than mine. I kept moving, lost in the swirling tide of flesh and bone. Wherever I saw an exposed neck or back, I struck. I took grim pleasure in my killing. Whatever the outcome of this day, I could not hold my head high in the company of warriors. More arrows flew overhead, and the cheers rising from our army were songs of freedom. And then the Shrimans broke. It began as a single slave warrior turning his back and running, but his panic spread like fire on the plain, and soon the whole formation was streaming back down the hill. In the days leading up to this moment, Syjax had told me that the most dangerous moment for any warrior is when a regiment breaks. This is when the killing truly begins. We tore through the routed Shurimas, spears plunging into exposed backs, and axes splitting skulls. They were no longer fighting back, simply trampling one another to escape. The bloodshed was appalling, yet I revelled in it as hundreds of bodies were crushed in the slaughter. I saw Syjax again, then, standing firm, his polearm at his side. "Hold," he yelled. "Hold." I wanted to curse his timidity. Our blood was up, and the Shrimans were fleeing in panic. I did not know at the time, but Syjax had seen how dangerous our position truly was. "Pull back," he shouted, and the cry was taken up by others who saw what he had seen. At first it seemed our army would not heed his word, drunk on victory and eager to plunge forward. We were intent on slaying every one of the enemy, wreaking vengeance upon soldiers who had held our land hostage for centuries. I had not seen the danger, but all too soon I understood. Screams and fountains of blood sheaved from the leading edges of our battle line. Severed heads flew backwards, spinning like rocks skipping over a pool. Bodies soon followed, tossed wide without effort. Wow. Screams and cries of terror erupted, and the songs of freedom were snuffed down. The god warriors had entered the fray. 3 of them surged into our ranks, some moving like men, others like ravenous beasts. Each was armed with a weapon larger than any man could lift. Unstoppable and invincible, they waded through our ranks with swooping blows that slew a dozen men with every swing. Icathians flew in pieces from their crackling blades, were crushed beneath their tread, or were rent asunder like bloodied rags. Back, Syjax, back to the walls. So you can imagine it, okay? Normal warriors versus 9 Renekton's. Can you imagine that? You're fighting, doing your thing. Clearly, obviously, they've got the upper hand now. The enemies are retreating. And then 9 Renektons flying to the battle. Yeah. None could pierce the god warrior's armour, and their ferocity was so primal, so inhuman, that it froze me to the spot. Spears snapped against their iron-hard hides, and their bellowing roars cut me to the marrow with terror. One, a crawling beast, was ragged, feathered wings and a vulture-like beak leapt into the air and smeared blue fire blazed from its outstretched claws. Wow, I cried out at the sight of my fellow countrymen burned to ash. The elation that... So now they're going to release the void. The elation that had, only moments before, filled us with thoughts of victory and glory, now shattered like a fallen glass. In its place I felt a sick horror of torments yet to come, the retribution of an unimaginable cruel despot who knows no mercy. I felt a hand grab my shoulder and lifted my bloody blade. "Move, axe," said Syjax, forcing me back. "There's still fighting to be done." I was dragged along by the force of his grip, barely able to keep my feet. I wept as we streamed back to where we had first formed up. Our line was broken and surely the day was lost, but the god warriors simply stood among the dead, not even bothering to pursue. Chad, you said we had a weapon, I cried. "Why aren't they doing anything?" "They are," said Syjax. "Look." Ooh, the secret weapon. So, chapter, 5 I think it is. Chapter 4, good. Good. Puts into perspective how OP Jax is, and I like how it shows that even though they were beating the Shirimans, also how powerful these god warriors are as well. So, next chapter. What happened next defies my understanding. No mortal eye had ever seen such a thing. The pavilion exploded with forking traceries of light, arcing loops of purple energy ripped into the sky and lashed down like crashing waves. The force of the blast threw everyone to the ground. I covered my ears as a deafening scream tore the air. I pressed myself into the battle-churned earth as the wail buried deep into my skull, as though the world itself was shrieking in horror. I rolled onto my side, retching as stabbing nausea ripped through my belly. The sky, once bright and blue, was now the colour of a week-old bruise. Unnatural twilight held sway, and I saw flickering afterimages burn themselves into the back of my mind. Slashing claws, gaping maws, all-seeing eyes. I sobbed in terror at the sight of such horrors. Alone of all the things being stripped from me, I gladly surrender. A nightmarish light, sickly blue and ugly purple, smoothed the world, pressing down from above and blooming up from somewhere far below. I pushed myself upright, turning in a slow circle as the world ended around me. It's one way of putting it. The Shreemers were streaming back from the city, terrified by whatever force our priests had unleashed. My enemies were being destroyed, and I knew I would be triumphant, but this was not a victory any sane person could revel in. Exactly. This was an extinction. An abyss that bled purple light tore open amid the Shreemers, and I saw their ivory-skinned general overcome by whipping cords of matter. She fought to free herself with wild sweeps of her blade, but the power we had unleashed was too much for her. The pulsing glowing light spread over her body like a hideous cocoon. Wow. Everywhere I looked, I saw the same slick coils rising from the earth or from the very air itself to seize the flesh of mortals. Men and women were swept up and enveloped. I saw one Shreeman clawing her way over the earth. His body seemed to dissolve as the tendrils of foul energy overwhelmed him. I began to hope, to pray that this doom was what had been planned all along. I saw shapes in the flickering light, too fast and indistinct to make out clearly, stretching swelling limbs of strange tar-like matter. Men were clawed from their feet and pulled apart. I heard the gurgling, hooting bellows of things never meant to walk the surface of this world. As awful as this day had become, I wondered if this was the price of the great weapon our priests had unleashed. I hardened my heart to the suffering of the Shreemers and remembered that centuries of misery they had heaped upon us. Once again, I had lost sight of Syjax and Colgrim, but I no longer needed their presence to steady me. I proved myself worthy of my grandsire's name, worthy of the brand of my arm. I was Kahari. The sky groaned and buckled, sounding like a vast sailcloth tearing in a storm. I turned and ran back to the city, joining up with the other soldiers. I saw the same desperate, horrified looks on their faces. I knew must be upon mine. Had we won? I don't know about that. None of us knew. The Shreemers were gone, swallowed, all of them, whole by the terror we had unleashed upon the world. I felt no regret, no remorse. My horror had given way to justification. I had lost my Nimcha blade somewhere in the frenzy of the battle, so I took my bow from my shoulder and pumped it into the sky. Icathia, I yelled. Icathia. The chant was taken up again by the soldiers around me, and we stopped to watch the enemy finally overcome. The seething mass of matter that had consumed them lay like a shroud over the flesh it had consumed. Its surface was undulant, and swelling blisters of glistening matter burst open with frothing birth scars that twisted and folded like newborn animals. Wow. I turned as I heard the deafening grinding of rock. Booming cracks echoed as more and more chasms tore the landscape open. I dropped to my knees as the earth shook, and the walls of Icathia, fallen once and now again risen, were shattered by the groaning bass notes that split the earth. Geysers of dust and smoke erupted from within the city. I saw men screaming but could not hear them over the crash of falling rock and splitting earth. Towers and places that had stood since the first Mage King planted his star metal staff were swallowed whole by the ever-widening chasms. Only rubble and shattered fragments remained, my beloved city reduced to a charred skeleton. So, was it really worth it? Fire spat skyward, and the wails of my people were somehow magnified by the canyons of the city as they fell into the hideous doom below. Icathia, I cried one last time. I saw a flash of movement and flinched as something flew through the air above me. I recognised the vulture-headed god warrior from earlier in the battle. Its flight was eccentric, its limbs already partially ruined and unmade by the strange matter spilling from the rents of the earth. It flew towards the pavilion with desperate beats of its ravaged wings, and I knew I had to stop it. I ran towards the towering creature, knocking an obsidian-tipped arrow to my bow. The thing stumbled as it landed. Its legs were twisted, and its back was alive with devouring tendrils. Feathers and skin slowed from its head as it limped past the bodies of dead priests, whose own flesh bubbled and rolled with internal motion. Fire built around the god warrior's hand, ready to burn the pavilion with the last of its power. Sarjax had said that the Sun Emperor had more armies, and we would need our weapon intact if we were to defeat them. I drew back the bowstring, and obsidian arrow aimed at the god warrior. I loosed, and the arrow sped true, punching through the dissolving matter of its skull. Wow! The god warrior fell, and the fire faded from its hand. It rolled onto its side, the flesh falling from its bones. I saw threads of sinewy, pallid matter forming beneath. The god warrior sensed my presence and turned its vulturine head towards me. One of its eyes was milky and distended by growths of a strange fungus-like substance spreading across its skull. The other had my arrow protruding through it. Wow! Do you even know what you have done, foolish Icathian? The blind god warrior managed, its voice a wet growl of dissolving vocal cords. I sought to think of some powerful words, something to mark the moment I had killed the god warrior. All I could think of was the truth. We freed ourselves, I said. You have opened a door to a place that should never be opened, it hissed. You have doomed us all. Time for you to die, I said. The god warrior tried to laugh, but what came out was a gurgling death rattle. Die? No, what is to come will be far worse. It will be as if none of us ever existed. So these god warriors, this is an interesting chapter. These god warriors know all about the void. And this is a bit of a reach here, but what I was thinking is maybe the champions from the void are the god warriors. I don't know if there's 9 champions from the void, but what made me say that was the main god warrior leader is a woman. She was one of the first to be consumed. I'm thinking that maybe she's Belveth. It's a reach, but just throwing it out there. Anyways, on to the next chapter. I left the arrow embedded in the god warrior's skull. Men were limping back from the battle, blooded and weary, with the same look of incredulous horror in their eyes. None of us truly understood what had happened, but the Shreemans were dead, and that was enough. Wasn't it? We milled in confusion, none of us knowing what to say or do. The landscape before the city was twisting with unnatural motion, the flesh of the Shreeman army utterly obscured by pale, coiling ropes of hideous matter. Its surface was darkening as I watched, spitting where it hardened like some form of carapace. Viscous ichor spilled out, and more I had the impression that this was just the beginning of something far worse. Light still spilled from the colossal rents torn in the ground, and the alien sounds, a mix of shrieking, hissing and crazed howls, echoed from far below. I could feel tremors rising up from the bowels of the earth, like the slow grinding of bedrock that prestiges an earthquake. What's down there? said a man I didn't know. His arm was all but encased in a translucent coil that was slowly creeping its way up to the side of his neck. Wow, I wondered if he even knew. Sounds like a nest or a lair or something. I didn't know what hideous things lived down there, nor did I want to know. Or did I want to? I heard a voice call my name and looked up to see Sarjax limping towards me. His face was a mask of blood thanks to a jagged wound that ran from above his right eye to his jawline. I hadn't thought Sarjax could bleed at all. You're hurt, I said. It's worse than it looks. It's worse than it looks. Is this the end? I asked him. For Icathia, I fear it is, he replied. Moving away to grab the bridle of a cavalryman's mount. The beast was skittish, but Sarjax hauled its reins and vaulted onto the saddle. So, I would have given everything to see the Shreemans defeated, I murmured. I fear we just did, said Sarjax, but we won. The Shreemans are dead, but I'm not sure that's the same thing, said Sarjax. Now find a mount, we have to go. Go? What are you talking about? Icathia is doomed, he said. You see that, don't you? Not just the city, but our land. Look around you, this will be our fate too. I knew he was right, but the idea of simply riding away, I didn't know if I could. Icathia is my home, I said. There's nothing left of Icathia, or at least there won't be soon. He extended his hand to take mine, and I shook it. Axa, he said, casting a glance back at the creeping horror, there is no hope here. I shook my head and said, I was born here, and I will die here. Then hold on to what you are while you still can, lad, he said, and I felt the weight of your sadness and guilt. It's all you have left. Sajax turned his mount and rode away. Wow, I never saw him again. Oh, snap. So I imagine the final chapter. This is his name, Amux Vorchoi Karai Icathia. I think Amux was my grandsire's name. It has meaning, but I can no longer remember what. I wonder the ruins. I wonder if this is Zillion then, or who else could it be? Wonder the ruins. Malzahar? I wonder the ruins where a great city once stood. All that is left is an impossibly wide crater, rubble, and a tear in the fabric of the world. I feel a terrible emptiness before me. Axamuk was a king, I think. I do not remember where. Was it here, in this ruined sunken city? I do not know what var or choi mean. Icathia should have meaning to me, but whatever it was, it's gone. There is a terrible void where my mind and memories once were. My name is Axamuk. Karai was... What is that? There is a mark on my arm, a sword wrapped in a scroll. Is it a slave mark? Was I the property of a conqueror? I remember a girl, right at the beginning, with green eyes and an opal necklace. Who is she? Was she my wife, my sister, a daughter? I don't know, but I still remember the smell of her flowers. This is his name again. My name is Axamuk. I repeat it over and over, hold on to it as if I can stave off this slow dissolution. I wonder if he's infected by the void as well. I do not want to forget it. It is all I have left. My name is Axamuk. I am being erased. I know this, but I do not know why or how. Something awful, there we go, withers within me. All that I am is unravelling. I am being undone. My Woo! Okay, that's mad. That's a mad one. Okay, great ending. You're gonna see it, can't you? You're gonna see that scene right at the end as well. Wow. So we have Zillion. Zillion wasn't even mentioned in this though. Clearly we've got Jax. I don't think this guy is Zillion, so it's strange that Zillion's not mentioned in this story, which is crazy. He obviously, based on his story and bio, was there at the events that take place here, but it's not mentioned. I don't think he is the character here. I'm trying to, maybe this guy here isn't a champion, but I'm just feeling it'd be cool if Axamuk is a champion. It can't be Malzahar. I don't know who it could be. Cassidin, maybe. I don't know. Either way, what an amazing story. I'm glad I read this story. By far one of the best ones I've read. Really nice to tie this in with the Void, with the champions I've most recently read as well, including Jax. And let's go back up to the top. See, this image kind of ties in a little bit better now, doesn't it? This is a great picture. So, what's interesting here though is, are these Shuriman? So this is the Void. Are these maybe the Shurimans that are getting wrecked here? And the Icathians are somewhere else. I don't know. But either way, I really do like the look of it. And this is my reach. This is my theory. The God Warriors are now the champions from the Void. And the main God Warrior woman, who was first assimilated by the Void, the leader, is Belveth. That's my kind of like throw out there. It's a reach, but that's what I'm going with. That is what I'm going with. So, yeah, really good read. Hopefully enjoyed my thoughts and reactions and read through of this story as well. Thank you for the countless people that have recommended that I have to read this as well. It was definitely worth the read. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.